Okay, I'd like to go ahead and call to order the Committee of the Whole. First item is Department of Economic Development.
Good evening, everyone. Sorry, my day's kind of skewy. Before you this evening, we have a request from my office in partnership with Skinnell Properties. They're a company based out of Indianapolis. They're exploring the development of between 275,000 and 300,000 square feet of speculative industrial warehouse office space located near the intersection of Deffenbaugh and Eastgate, city of Gahanna. A few comments that you're going to see as you review the documents. If you open up the ROI, and Kevin, if you can go pull up that document as well on the screen, I ran the numbers a couple different ways. So to Mr. Schnetzer and Ms. Bauer's comments previously as part of prior council meetings, we took out the building value. So what you're seeing in the ROI is straight wage, and then to Mr. Schnetzer's points, is dollars in and dollars out. So things that the city will be gaining through this project and things that the city will be paying out as part of this project. The key difference in this project versus prior versions of other similar type projects, think Eastgate Industrial or Taylor Industrial Parks, they're both in those same areas. Those developers had requested a 10-year, 100% abatement. In this instance, this developer is requesting a 15-year because of the size and scale of the principally larger building to be economically viable. To do that, Kevin, if you can pull from go to the 15-year tab and then scroll down. You'll see here that the value of the abatement is significantly higher from the 10 to 15 year. For obvious reasons, we're extending that term out for an extra 5 years. But what we ended up doing is taking the difference between that 15 and 10-year valuation and creating a pilot or payment in lieu of taxes arrangement as part of this agreement. So that difference between the 10 and 15-year abatement valuation and how we, just so we're all clear on this too, how we calculated that was, Kevin, you go to the final tab where it says comp properties. We went into the marketplace and we identified key properties of similar size and scale and took their appropriate price per square footage and then averaged those prices per square footage as part of the comp model. And so we were able to really have a high level of specificity and with this project to know exactly where this thing's probably going to land on an annual basis from an assessed value standpoint. As we all know, assessed versus market values are two very different values and certainly different than taxable value. So if I can have you go back to the 15-year, Kevin. And so we have a high level of certainty of what that value of the abatement's going to be. And then you scroll back down a little bit, Kevin, you'll see the school compensation has increased from the 10 to the 15 for your obvious reasons. We're extending that out. And so then we took that difference of that school compensation between the two. That equates to just over $550,000 of a pilot arrangement between the two models. And then that will be paid back to the city over a course of 15 years. So we're basically recapturing those dollars. What it equates to is at about, I think it's the 13 cents per square foot on the building annually is what we calculated it out to. So, you know, they can be marketed on the open marketplace as a 15-year, 100% abated property, but in reality, it's just baked into the CAM rate, the common area assessment area for the property. And if you go back all the way up to the Kevin, on the 15-year model, we're still ahead, especially with the pilot. So we always shoot for that 100%. So that means whatever we're putting in, we're getting out at least a 1-to-1. So we're just over that 1-to-1 ratio in this model at 108% with that pilot arrangements as currently proposed in the arrangement. And if you go to the final tab, Kevin, the pilot, you'll see how it would be paying out. So you see the full difference there at 552, 165.60. That's at 36,811.04. And the way it's structured in the CRA is that once they receive 50% occupancy of their building and an occupancy permit for the building, that will begin the clock on that, and it'll go for 15 years straight. So it doesn't matter if it takes 0 days for that building to be 50% leased, or it takes the first 2 years, they'll still go full 15 out to pay off that pilot arrangement with us. So we'll get our money back either way in this scenario. With me this evening, I have Dan Harrington from Skinnell Properties. He's able to answer any questions you might have as well as part of the project, and I welcome any feedback you may have.
Mr. Schnetzer.
Thank you, Mr. President. And Nate, thank you for the presentation. Just a So I think I understand the cash flow schedule, when it would start theoretically.
Yep.
And how it gets paid out over time. But what's the logic, I guess, from the occupant standpoint of,
Oh, just making sure that the building could cash flow.
say
It was,
that
that was,
again?
that was a negotiated percentage of volume in the building from where the project becomes viable and cash flows. That percentage could fluctuate. Mr. Harrington would have a better position to answer that question, but that was just the negotiated rate that I thought was probably a fair balance.
Yeah,
on the
it's
property.
more the, it's been a while since we've seen one of these, I guess, structured like this with
Sure.
the pilots, right? And so I guess, is it that they're not necessarily entitled to 15 years, but they're asking for 15 years in order
That
to
is
make?
correct.
Okay, so in order to make that amenable to the city, they're making it up, and this is just sort
Yeah.
of a timing?
As I showed in the 15-year percentage, if you go back, Kevin, to the 15-year tab, when you get below that 100% return on investment, it gets me a little squishy. That's my technical term from an economic development standpoint. And so that's where we kind of looked at how do we get it back to that, at least that 1-to-1, if not substantially higher than 1-to-1 in the ratio side of it. And that's where that volume, that's where the pilot made sense to us.
Okay.
That 50% occupancy number, that could be something that could be tweaked as part of a final arrangement with the law director's office.
So I guess the benefit to the to the developer, to the occupant, is that those payments don't kick in until, I guess, they've reached, like you said, some level of minimum viability to the project?
Yep.
Okay.
And then
all right.
and then they cash out to us for 15 years from that point
Okay.
forward.
I was just trying to understand, like I said, from their vantage point, what made sense and why they would enter into this agreement. So, okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Ms. McGregor?
I don't see this as being a reason for emergency.
Mr. Harrington, if I can have you come up here real quick. Emergency issues. Mike, there you go. Speak directly into the mic. Pull it right up to you. You're going to have to get right up into it.
All right. So the question is, why is it an emergency issue? For us, it's speed to market. We're trying to move very quickly to get the building going as soon as possible. Material cost increases, as you guys have probably heard, are going through the roof. Every day that goes by that I'm not securing steel and precast and those types of things is a day that price is going up. And one of the other reasons is I'm trying to get lenders to finance the project, and they are kind of waiting to see if we're able to get the tax abatement, if we're going to be able to compete with some of the surrounding communities with respect to tax abatement. So they want me to call them and say, we've got it, and then they're willing to secure funding for the project. So all those things being considered, mostly it's a cost function. I need to get things secured and understood and financed.
I'm not sure that's a real reason legislatively, why we grant emergencies. I understand it's an emergency on your part, but I'm not sure that's a reason for us to grant that.
To your point, Councilwoman, there's been similar emergencies granted in the ADB project recently for similar reasons of speed to market and constructability as a legislative need. So that has been a prior request and approval by this council.
Okay. Thank you.
Anybody else?
So this will be on the 7th? Is that correct?
So,
Is it,
yes, that is the plan.
So it's-
Be on the 7th. If we approve to move forward, yes.
okay. I'm just bringing that up because in emergency and a waiver, normally there wouldn't be that extra,
Right.
That's,
that extra time. So I'm coming to your
No.
place here because I think that's a potential reason to do this.
I understand Councilwoman McGregor's point and hesitancy. I really do, from the people's point of view. And we are trying to, we also know that we are living in very strange times economically. And so I'm trying to bend with the benefit of the doubt. I mean, we have an agreement that I think we worked out that seems sound for the city. But I understand, I just wanted to state for the record that I truly understand the hesitancy. And I think we need to be cautious about this. Anybody else? So come back to the agenda on the 7th. Okay, thank you so much.
That'll be regular agenda.
It'd be a regular agenda, yes, thank you for pointing that out. Department updates. Mayor's Court.
Hi there.
Hi, we don't get your presence that often, so welcome.
Thank you very much, yes. Though I've technically probably met all of you, I do appreciate you giving me the opportunity to officially introduce myself. I'm Amanda Parker. I'm the Director of Court Services here in the city. Quick background for me, I have my BA from the Ohio State University in criminology. I went from there to the Columbus Police Department as a 911 dispatcher 911 call taker for 5 years. At that point, I had my first child and I decided to stay home for 8 years. So I was at home for 8 years before I went to the city of Canal Winchester as their clerk of court. Some may say that 8 years was a lost 8 years work-wise. I will submit to you that when people come to the police department or to court, they are not having their best day. And there is nothing like staying home 24 hours a day with 2 kids under 2 to prepare you to be patient with unhappy citizens. So I was well prepared when I went to Canal Winchester. From there, I came here, and I've been here about 11 years. When we talk about mayor's courts, most people know what they are, but they don't know exactly what the difference is, maybe between the county courts that are downtown and what a mayor's court can do. So I would like to give a quick overview of what mayor's courts are and what services we can provide. Ohio Revised Code 1905 provides for the existence of mayor's courts in the state of Ohio. There are 297 mayor's courts operating in 64 counties throughout the state. And though it's called a mayor's court, that's kind of a misnomer. They're very rarely run by the mayor. Best practice is that it would be presided over by a magistrate. The magistrate has to have been a practicing attorney for the past 3 years. They go through 12 hours of training their first year with an additional 3 to 6 hours every year thereafter. We only hear misdemeanor cases. So technically, any case that can go downtown to Franklin County Municipal Court can also be heard in Mayor's Court, with the exception of a couple things. Domestic violence cases are often misdemeanor cases, but we do not have jurisdiction over domestic violence or any type of assault where a protection order could be issued. So we don't have the ability to issue something like that here. So we don't have jurisdiction over that. And we don't have jurisdiction over second or third or fourth offense OVIs. So we do have jurisdiction. We can hear first offense OVIs. Gahanna doesn't currently elect for us to hear first-time OVIs, but we do have jurisdiction to do that. We're not a court of record, which can be confusing when people hear that. It does not mean that cases that are heard here don't get on someone's record, that it doesn't go down to the BMV. They're reported to the Bureau of Criminal Identification and Investigation. They're reported to the BMV. They go on your record, sorry to say to some people who might think differently. But what it does mean is that we don't have transcripts, that our court proceedings are not recorded. So because of that, that allows the defendant an opportunity with mayor's court that they don't have in other courts, which is they have, when their case is adjudicated in mayor's court, if they're not happy with their outcome, they have 10 days to file an appeal. And that appeal, a trial de novo, it's called a trial de novo, and that appeal allows them to take their case back down to Franklin County Municipal Court, and it starts completely over as if it's never been heard before. So they kind of get two bites at the apple. They get a chance to come here, and if they are not happy with that outcome, they can take it down to Franklin County Municipal Court. That happens very, very rarely. So Mayor's Court provides a smaller, more convenient, oftentimes more efficient option for citizens to have their citations taken care of. We do have some new and exciting things going on. Most of you know, because you helped pass the ordinance last year, that we have a shared services agreement with New Albany for us to administer New Albany Mayor's Court. The collaboration seems to be the first of its kind. The shared service model is a trend that seems like it's going to continue, and we've set ourselves up well to be a leader in that area. It went into effect Q4 of 2021, October 15th, so we're only a quarter in, but it seems to be going well. We hold court on Thursdays, so we have Gahanna Court in the morning and early afternoon, followed by New Albany Mayor's Court in the later afternoon. Makes for a long day, but it gets it all done in one day, and we're able to then make that turnaround and have court again next week. At this time, we've been able to absorb the additional workload of adding New Albany Mayor's Court and keeping our staff that we're at right now, which is myself and 2 deputy clerks. In taking over New Albany Mayor's Court, I'm completing all of the duties of the clerk of court for the city of Gahanna, as well as the city of New Albany. Those things include end-of-month reporting, bank reconciliations, reporting to the director of finance for both cities, as well as city council for both cities. The reports that I give New Albany are similarly structured to the reports that I give you every month, or that I give to the mayor to forward to you. And I thought that maybe tonight would be an opportunity to go over our last month report that I gave to you. This is kind of a refresher for most of you, but we've got a couple new council members. Just maybe we could explain a little bit about what I'm giving, what information is included, and make sure that I'm giving you everything that you need. Thanks, Kevin. So the Mayor's Court, at the beginning, you'll see this is our bank reconciliation. Mayor's Court is a zero-based account. So there should, at the end of each month, there should be nothing in the accounts other than outstanding checks and open bonds. Everything else will be dispersed out. This is not a place to hold money. And as you can tell, the good example, I guess, last month is we reconciled to the penny because we were off by a penny last month. If we are off at any point, I'll put it right under there and explain to you why we were off and when it should balance. Each month, if you'll scroll down, Kevin, just a little bit for the funds to be dispersed. There are 2 to 3 checks that'll be written each month and 1 ACH that'll go out in order to disperse all of those funds that have come in for the month. The city of Gahanna gets 1 check, but it's broken down into 4 accounts, technically 4 funds. In the order that they are up there, the building fund, we have a special fund that Ohio Revised Code 1901.26 allows for us to charge a fee in addition to regular court costs that can be used for the acquisition of additional facilities. Apropos timing for us to be holding on to our building fund and trying to grow that to be able to help maybe with the facilities workshops. At this point, $5 per case is what we have allocated for our building fund. The clerk's computer fund, a different portion of the same revised code 1901.261, allows us to collect additional funds to computerize the office of the clerk of court. The ORC says we cannot exceed $10 per case. We elect to charge $8 per case. There are very strict guidelines as to what this money can be used for. For examples of recent uses of this fund are software upgrades, software support, maintenance of copiers, fax machine scanners, computer equipment, things like that. It has to be something that is for the computerization of the office of the clerk of court. We also have a computer fund, a court computer fund that was started recently in the last couple of years. Additionally, we can collect a fee that is $3 a case to use for computerized legal research services or to computerize the court itself. So where the first fund is only for my office, this one can actually be used to computerize the court. So maybe we eventually would want to get some type of computer equipment for the magistrate or something along those lines if they want to have that up at the bench with them. Again, strict guidelines as to what we can use it for. We currently use that fund to provide LexisNexis for our mayor's court prosecutors to use. And then finally, it says fines, fees, and forfeitures. It could technically be called the general fund, but it is comprised of those fines and fees and things that come from those cases, and they are deposited into the general fund. The state of Ohio requires us to collect various fees and fines from each case to be sent to the state of Ohio directly. These funds include things like the Victims of Crime, Indigent Defense Support Fund, drug law enforcement, seatbelt, child safety restraints. So we collect things on their behalf and send them into the state of Ohio every month. As well as the city of Columbus. House Bill 215 in 2009 designated that $1.50 of every moving violation cost is to be appropriated for the Indigent Drivers Alcohol Treatment Fund. These funds are totaled and sent monthly to the City of Columbus Treasurer, and they're used for indigent services for cases that are down in Franklin County Municipal Court. Collections is down there. In the past, we have sent cases to collections. If they've had a warrant and they have fines and costs that are unpaid, if that warrant has been in effect for over 30 days, they were sent to collections. We haven't been sending them as much recently, but we do still have cases in collections. So occasionally as they come through, those cases are charged a flat fee of $50 per case, but that is passed along to the defendant. So when the defendant pays their fees to us, we will then pass it back and pay to the collections agency. If you don't mind scrolling down a little bit more, Kevin. I do also just put on here for your information, cases transferred quarterly. That means if there are cases that were written to Mayor's Court that for one reason or another were transferred back to Franklin County Municipal Court, I'll keep track of those so that we know each quarter how many cases have been transferred and what the total is for the year. As well as on the right, you'll see the new cases filed. So that kind of just gives you an idea of where we're at each month on how many cases we've gotten in and year to date. That is all I have for you tonight.
Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions?
I have a question. This is pretty picky, but when I first saw that for the court fund,
Uh-huh.
I knew that it was $5. Why is there a $2? Why is it $692? I know the fee is $5 per ticket. That's
For
Love
the
that.
building fund?
Love-
on the
love
yeah
Nancy.
on the clerk or on the building fund.
So specifically to that one, I can't tell you exactly why, but I can tell you that when we allow people to make partial payments,
Okay.
and it has a structure as to what those payments have to be
Okay.
applied to. So it could have just been that they paid $30 and that got us,
To $2.
yes, exactly. That might have gotten us $2 into the building fund, and the next time they make a payment, it will finish that out.
It just was like I first
But,
saw
right.
that.
I
Why is
understand,
it not a multiple?
I understand that. That is definitely going to be a partial payment of some sort where it just oddly cuts off in the middle.
So
And
Nancy.
the cases, the new cases, is that total like tickets written for the whole month, all the tickets, or is that case, what does that mean actually?
It is the citations that come in that are given a case number. So
Okay.
it would be traffic, criminal, parking,
Okay.
all of the cases that come into us.
Amanda, would that also include code enforcement violations?
It does.
Thank you.
Amanda, I do have a question. Capital Recovery Systems is the collections agency.
Yes.
How are they selected? Is that something that you put out an RFP or something, or is that state-driven?
It is not. There are different options. That has been in place since well before I got here. I know from other agents or other mayor's courts in the community or in the central Ohio that that is one that is used most often. But they are ones that allow us to make a flat fee instead of a percentage, which at the time helped with calculating it and us getting them paid back. Instead of like a 30, some places would do maybe a 30%, which would come out to an odd number, or we just knew that we were always adding a $50 fee.
Okay, so they make their money based off of that. It's not like there's an agreement with the city of Gahanna.
I believe that there was at one time. It is not something that is a contract that is ongoing or that needs.
Okay, just curious. Thank you.
Yeah.
Other questions? Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Give me 1 second, trying to get back to the agenda. All right, Department of Parks.
Good evening. Excuse me as I get comfortable. My update's a little different than Amanda's, but I can share the sentiment that toddlers do create patience. So I can definitely, say that's a fact. So tonight, discussing the Comprehensive Parks Master Plan. A little bit of background. This was discussed throughout the budget process. This evening, we'll provide and offer updates to where we are in the process, as well as answer any questions that you have prior to moving forward. A little bit of history on the Comprehensive Parks Master Plan. The original plan was adopted by City Council in 2006. The original plan was created as a guide for decision-making for programs, policies, operations, maintenance, and also included capital improvements. The results from that plan from 2006 identified that trails were an important part to the Gahanna community. So a lot of time and emphasis was put around connectivity and formulating a plan, which ultimately the Big Walnut Trail. There was also a focus on land acquisition. There was an understanding that the Gahanna community was intended to expand. So in order to accommodate that expansion, some land acquisition would be necessary in order to keep up with the needs for community members. From an operations and maintenance standpoint, cost recovery strategies, as well as the creation of the Parks and Recreation Foundation were all a couple things that were stimulated from the creation of the Parks Master Plan as well. In 2015, moving along a few years, there was an update to that plan, which it was covering 2013 and 14. The plan was published in 2015. And the fundamental purpose of that plan update was to determine how to operate effectively given financial constraints. The scope was pared down significantly, and capital improvements were removed from the scope of that plan. But with that, the pricing policy, which is something that is reviewed annually by City Council by the recommendation of the Parks Board, still in effect today, as well as the affiliate user athletic policy, which also, again, is still in action today. It's an industry standard to update every 5 years, and obviously we've a few years past that, but I will say, and even though the plans are in need of an update, the information that we gain from those plans are very much still useful for the department. The 2022 master plan serves as an ideal timeline. Issue 12 created a funding mechanism for deferred maintenance, but as well as expanded services. There's been significant changes to the community, including but not limited to school facilities and the expansion of their facilities as well as their athletic fields will be a direct impact to the Parks and Recreation Department. And then obviously just changes within the Parks and Recreation Department. There's new leadership, there's a new staffing structure, and quite a bit of new personnel. So it definitely creates an ideal timeline to go through this exercise. In concert with the Director of Finance, it was verified that the plan does not require a bidding process. The plan is a refresh and an update to an existing plan. And the Pros Consultants is the same firm who did the original plan in 2006 as well as the plan in 2015. So it definitely saves some time as well as money. And Pros Consultants is held in high regard in the industry. For the actual plan for 22, to put it simply, will be pared down to 3 different components. The first phase will take a look at where we are today, and that will be done, this is an exhaustive list, but with a park facility review, there'll be a SWOT analysis, as well as data review of trends within the industry, as well as peer agencies. The next step would be a where are we going? So this will be a great opportunity for public engagement that will be done through surveys, through staff, as well as key stakeholder focus groups and interviews, and then a needs assessment as well. And then that last phase will be a how do we do that? How do we get there? And that will be an evaluation of funding and revenue strategies, as well as written goals and objectives that create a clear vision. So a draft of that plan will be presented to City Council before any adoption. And then once completed, we will have an action plan, again, with those goals and objectives. We'll have a 10-year capital improvement plan and a true evaluation of our current maintenance and operations to set a new level standard. There is the plan is connected into your packet for your review, the Pros Consultants. So if there's any questions about that, I'd be happy to answer them.
Are there any questions? I don't have any questions. I'm very happy to actually see that this has now come to fruition, so definitely needed. Pardon me. So we don't have this earmarked yet for an agenda. Are you saying that this would actually come before us next meeting?
So with the since it doesn't go through the bid process, the mayor is able, with approval, to move forward and sign contract. We could ultimately do that.
It's a
at this
professional
point.
services contract. It does not necessarily need to come before council, but we wanted to have this dialogue with you before we took any action and did anything to get input, questions, direction from council as well on this.
Understood. Well, thank you for doing that. What is, then what's your turnaround time on doing something, putting this out there, or signing it?
So the plan itself is a 9-month. So city attorney has reviewed the contract and the language and feels comfortable with mayor's signature. So we could ultimately initiate the contract and kick off the project and get going so that we can initiate that 9-month time frame.
Okay.
Did you say the plan is, we have the 9-month layout of this?
That's correct.
Where is that?
It's further down in the agreement. If you.
It's the last page of the document. I think
It is last page.
page 11.
And so that's why I was wondering, it talks
Oh,
about it
okay.
in generic terms about 9 months. But so what is,
And what's the cost?
well, it's in there, about a 98 grand, a little bit more.
So if there were not any significant concerns or questions from council tonight, the plan would be to engage pros consultant, per this contract, get them started on this. And I would also, just kind of want to reset the button with this. As council knows, we've been having facilities workshops. So we have several projects right now, initiatives that are all really on parallel tracks. And I'll even back up a little bit before I get to that. You know, for many years, we heard the 2006 plan was done, and from which that plan came wonderful initiatives. The Parks and Recs Foundation, Big Walnut Trail were just a few of those. But there were many capital things that were identified in that 2006 plan that we simply were not able to do. We had no money. So a lot has changed since that plan was done. The residents have entrusted us with funding through issue 12, but we need to be strategic in how we invest those dollars. We need to have a strategy for how we invest those dollars. So right now, this is where I jumped in earlier to start. We have several initiatives to help us create that strategy around how we are now going to invest those dollars from issue 12. We have deferred capital maintenance projects that need to be caught up on. We have parks facilities. We have trails that our residents want to see move forward. We have other projects now that have come up through issue 12 discussions that we need to evaluate. Community Rec Center, for example. We're having facility workshops. So right now we are going through the facilities assessments with all of you. The Parks Master Plan would also be happening. And then we would also begin the long-term capital improvement plan development. So both this plan and the facilities workshops, once completed, would morph into and be rolled into the long-term capital improvement plan, which is something we have never had as a city. And I know that's something that our finance chair, Councilman Schnetzer, has long talked about that this city needs. Really, that would help us create the strategy around how are we going to invest these dollars? How are we going to prioritize projects over the next 1 to 5, 5 to 10, 10 to 15 years. So all of these initiatives, again, parallel tracks that would converge sometime right around time in October when we'd be coming forward with the budget, so that we then have a clear path forward, that each year then, as we come through the budget process, we would look to the long-term capital improvement plan and say, okay, now we know we're doing this next year and this the year after. And we can set up the funding approaches for that as well. So it's all part of a bigger strategy. We've known where we want to go, but we've not known how we need to get there, what we need to do to get there. This is the what do we need to do to get to where we want to go.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah, please.
there's, with the infrastructure,
Yes, ma'am.
if we have infrastructure that we want to do, we need to potentially move on that as fast as possible because of the fact that there's a whole lot of money coming in. It's like a once-in-a-lifetime thing. So are you going to have those particular things in the plan?
And that's
in
exactly
terms
with
of
those
infrastructure?
funding opportunities and alternative funding, it's part of the plan, absolutely.
I mean, you can, and if you can get in there fast, you get in there with not having to put a 20% on it with it. So, I mean, it's really important that we move as fast as we can on this thing. I don't know, did any of them see the stuff that was done last week from ORPC?
I don't know if they had a chance to participate in those as well. I know there have been other webinars as well that have been offered that have talked about the infrastructure funding opportunities. So I don't know if they were able to do last week. I was not. I unfortunately had a conflict with the MORPC time, but I have attended some other ones as well that really have outlined the
I think you
opportunities.
can get it online. They were about 45 minutes each, but it's really important because this is one that we can really deal with. And how much is this plan going to be to refresh it?
If you remember from the budget discussions that we had in the fall, we talked about this there, and I think
Try
it
to
was.
forget those.
It was 100,000. That was what was discussed, and Director Farrell, that was your presentation at the time. I'll let you speak to that.
Is it 100,000?
100,000, that's correct.
To refresh this into,
That's correct.
again, I would suggest that we move fast on this, that we move fast on something like this, because the money's going to come, and then we need to, if we can get in there first, it's a biggie.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you again. You definitely have your homework cut out for you. I see where you do a needs assessment, there's a phase of doing basically a conditional assessment of what we actually have. The output of all of that is, I'd be interested in seeing when you guys actually have it all done, so. Oh, sorry.
Chair, thank you. Has this consultant done similar studies in the area by any chance?
Yes, they have. Yes, it is and I don't want to say each community, and I'm happy to provide that for you, but again, within Ohio Parks and Recreation Association as an industry, they're represented well. And actually at our state conference in February, the president of the consultant firm is speaking. So they definitely have a lot of good references.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you so much.
you.
Really appreciate it. The next item is Department of Planning.
Thank you very much. Michael Blackford, Director of Planning. Tonight, my presentation is a little bit different than the two we just heard. I'm going to go over a couple of projects that we're working on in the department, but before I do that, I'll just go over a little overview of who actually is the Department of Planning. There's 4 different divisions. We have the building division. They do everything related to building permitting. So if you want to re-roof your home, or if you want to build that project that Nate was talking about, you have to come through building, pull various permits, and we conduct inspections. We have code enforcement. Code enforcement goes out there, they patrol the city, they respond to citizen requests and inquiries about basically consistency of property with our various rules and regulations. And I'll cover 2 of those initiatives that we'll be taking on this year: nuisance abatement code and rental registration. And then we have the planning and zoning department. We work on the planning commission applications, codes, land use plans, things of that nature. There are 10 individuals within the department. We also have, as part of our yearly budget, we always request a significant amount of monies for outside consultants, because a lot of the inspections that we do, you build a building, you're going to need dozens and dozens of inspections. We contract most of that work out to folks. So a few initiatives I want to cover tonight. First one's nuisance abatement code. I'll go over, just what it is and what the purpose is. The purpose of nuisance abatement code is to protect the health, safety, and welfare and prevent blight. So how does nuisance abatement code do that? Well, it's a compliance tool that works in conjunction with code enforcement. To give you an example of how code enforcement works, let's say, Councilman Schnetzer, we receive a complaint on your property for junk and debris. Code enforcement would go out there, they'd take a look at the property. They saw junk and debris, they would give a notice of violation. Homeowner has maybe a couple of weeks or a month to rectify that issue. We go back out there, we take a look. If it's not rectified, we give another notice of violation, go back out, take a look. If it's not handled, then it goes on to, Amanda gave a great presentation of Mayor's Court, it goes on to Mayor's Court. Ultimately, at the end of the day, you may, as a resident, decide to pay a small fine rather than comply with the code. If that happens, that could take a whole year to go through that cycle, go through that. We have to start it all over again. So code enforcement can't actually make a homeowner comply with rules and regulations. We can encourage them through fines, but we actually don't have the authority to make folks comply. So the smart folks here at the city, they created this nuisance abatement code. That's an elevated tool to gain compliance. Code enforcement, we're going to be looking at properties. We're going to be identifying properties that are subject to this code. We're going to identify those. It'll be in a standard operating procedures. What we want to avoid is the appearance that it's a code enforcement officer who's targeting somebody. We get accused of that quite a bit. We want to avoid that, so we're going to have identified parameters. If you trip those, you're going to go on, and you're going to go from the code enforcement process up to the nuisance abatement code. Code enforcement, we're going to identify that. We're going to kick it up the chain of command there to the mayor and legal. They're going to be reviewing those, and then it really becomes more of a law and order type of situation where it goes on. And again, nuisance abatement code, that allows us to, instead of going to mayor's court, it goes to environmental court. The fines are greater, and there's actually tools now that we could the city would initiate compliance, and then we pass those costs back over to the property owner. So it's additional enforcement. Council action, well, you've already adopted the code, so we appreciate that. The fee schedule was just amended just about 35 days ago. The fee schedule needed to be amended for the appeals fee. You all appointed last, I think it was the fall, the Property Appeals Board members, and now we're really just going to implement the code. anytime you write code and implement it for the first, second, or 100th time, you're always going to be evaluating it to see, where there's areas of improvement. We expect to do that for this and for the next topic. And I would anticipate some minor code revisions coming back before City Council, probably April-ish of this year. Now I'm going to move on to rental registration. Rental registration is another program that the city has. Again, it's sort of health, safety, and welfare, and then really to protect property values as well. This applies to residential properties. This is not a commercial property tool. Every 2 years, as if you have a rental property here in the city, a residential rental property, you're going to come in, you're going to file a register with us. We're going to start a permit process. We're going to go out, we're going to evaluate the property. And when I say evaluate, that's going to be somebody on our code enforcement team. They're going to go out there. Code enforcement is exterior only. They don't have the legal authority to go into homes, so they walk around the property. Again, a lot of this is aesthetics, making sure things are well taken care of, making sure that there's not some structural issues and things of that nature. There's about 1,200 different properties, rental properties here in the city. It's a pretty big undertaking. The code was recently amended as well. The fee schedule was also amended. Those fees were revised. I expect there to be, some, I don't want to say substantial, but certainly some code changes that are going to be necessary as we go out. We start implementing and we kind of figure out what works, what doesn't work with the registration process, with some of those code. So we'll be back before you again, probably in April, with some code changes for rental registration and nuisance abatement code. One other item I want to talk to you about tonight, and to do that, I'm gonna take you back in time, to a simpler time. It's 1958. Eisenhower is president. The microchip was invented. The Barbie doll was released. The first U.S. satellite, which was like 3 months behind the Soviets. Now there's about 7,500 satellites floating around in space. And do you know what the average cost of a new home was in 1958? Anyone brave enough to guess?
1958,
$6,000.
I would say probably
$6,000.
I was going to say 4,000.
$12,750.
Oh.
Anyone know what Gahanna's population was at that point in time?
12,000.
That was probably 10,000.
Pardon?
10,000?
It was less than 2,500.
Wow.
But something
Wow.
profound happened in 1958. That's why I'm talking about it. It's the birth of zoning in Gahanna. That's when our zoning code was adopted. It was in April of 1958. So, as kind of the last slide indicated, there was significant amount of change that's occurred since 1958. Our zoning code has been amended quite a bit from 1958, but we really haven't done really a whole do-over, rewrite it, and that. Luckily, you all, thank you very much, you approved those dollars actually a couple of years ago. That zoning code, I've been probably pretty quiet about that initiative. Things were really busy, which is great. 2021 was a great year for development, but 2022, we're going to be focusing on rewriting that zoning code. Consultants working on it. Right now, it's in draft form. If you've ever written code and implemented, and that like 10-page update can take like a year. This is a couple hundred pages, so it's a pretty it's an exciting endeavor to be a part of here. So right now, staff, myself, other folks in planning, we're working with our consultant, going back and forth with rewriting that draft here. Eventually, probably spring, summer, I would anticipate some public engagement opportunities. My hope is to be before you probably the very end of 2022. You all would be part of that, Planning Commission would be part of it, but ultimately it's up to City Council to approve that. What are we trying to accomplish? Well, at some point, you just can't keep amending a 1958 code. You really have to reimagine it. So we really want to modernize the code, and if you're looked at our zoning code, there's just sort of paragraph after paragraph after paragraph after paragraph after paragraph of just text talking, not really clearly indicating what we want, what our standards are. And that's probably the most common complaint that I receive about our zoning code. It's not, gosh, we just don't want to go through planning commission or permitting and we don't like that. We get a lot of that, but really it's confusion to what do we need to do to build here? So we need to be bring more clarity. We need to be concise. We need to tell folks what we expect because the zoning code really tells people what they can build and how they can build it. And you need to be as clear as possible. The development community really appreciates when a community is clear and concise. So we're going to reformat that code. I think our current code is a couple hundred pages at least. I think there's a total of like 3 pictures in there. You're going to have pretty much a picture or a table on every other page at the new zoning code. So we're shifting from blocks of text to more pictures. It's going to make it a lot more digestible for everyone. We're going to clarify some of the language involved as well. So again, we're going to modernize it. That's really from a formatting standpoint. We need to kind of change how it's formatted, bring clarity to what our expectations are. You know, what are those standards? What is a setback? What uses can I do? Sometimes those are surprisingly difficult to actually find in our code because it might be mentioned in like 6 different places, and that's not ideal. So that'll make it a little bit more clear. It's going to be easier to use, and life will be good. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions. I'm also happy to head home for the evening. Whatever your pleasure.
You're staying. I think this is really needed.
Ray, would you like to add something?
Yes, the birth of our zoning code may have been the second most important birth that year. I don't know who else might have been born that year.
According to my research, Madonna, Michael Jackson, and Prince were all born in 1958. So you must be referring to one of those
Yes.
luminaries.
That was it.
That was
it. Yeah.
Figured he was a Prince fan. Thank you.
Anybody else? I definitely want to thank you. I mean, you had a very aggressive thing ahead of you. I applaud you deeply for the measures, you and the mayor, for taking up, especially on the nuisance code. That is something, as long as I've been on council, I've been really after specific properties, and I've gotten maybe some satisfaction, and I know there's more coming, and I really, really deeply appreciate being taught and learned on how this actually takes place. One thing, feral cats, that is a real big issue. And I know that might not be on your map on this, but I would definitely like to understand what would you recommend us do to put that on the map that we can actually have a very good community dialogue about this?
So that issue has come up, and that is, I can't speak too in-depth about that, but that issue has come up, and that is not a city issue. We actually refer those to Franklin County, I don't know whom over there,
It's
but.
I would say it's a frustrating issue that we have had residents, particularly on the west side, who have a significant problem with that over there. And it has been extremely frustrating to call agency to agency to agency. One refers you to the other one, to the other one, to the other one, and no one can really offer any help. So I actually think this is a broader issue than just the city of Gahanna. I think this is maybe something more that should be looked at on a countywide issue as to what we can do with other municipalities working together. But there really isn't a whole lot of options for us to be able to provide our residents, and I know we've had some discussions, Mr. City Attorney, as well as Chief Spence, around even criminal code that we could look to, and there's very little recourse out there available for us right now. So it's going to take something that's probably a bigger action than just maybe what we can look to here, but perhaps provides a collaborative opportunity with other municipalities as well.
Okay. I'll help in any way, shape, or form one night. Thank you.
Terminex. Call Terminex.
I don't want to kill him. Anybody else?
I mean, really.
All right, thank you. Good Lord. Okay, City Attorney, you have an item?
Yes, I do. I sent this to you early because it consists of 130-some pages. This is another codification. We did one earlier for the traffic code. This one is for the general offense code. This is over a year old now when they first did this, but with COVID and everything that's happened and trying to get the traffic code to you first because it was smaller than this one. And then also, towards the end of the year, we decided to wait until our new board, council members got on board so that since they're going to be passing it, we wanted to wait so that they could see what it is in front of them. Keep in mind that this is not an entire overhaul of of our general offenses code. It's just select ordinances and statutes that were chosen by the codifier, that they compare ours with the state of Ohio, and if it's different from the state of Ohio, this brings it in line with the state of Ohio. I then go through this whole thing and look at it all and decide if this is what we want. Do we want this? For instance, the one that comes to mind is reckless off. In the traffic code, we wanted to have a higher level of reckless off than the minor misdemeanor, so we didn't accept that change in that one code. But things like that, I go through each one of these, make sure this is what we want. I apologize for the fact that it's not redlined. That's how we got it from the codifier, which made it much more difficult to go through. I owe a huge debt of gratitude to Becky Whittington. She was a godsend on this and helping me get this together and pulling it together and making the changes I wanted to make. I make the changes, I send it back to the codifiers, they then make the changes and send it back to us, and then we review them again. And so when you look at this, just keep in mind, this isn't every statute. This is just trying to bring our ordinances in line with the state of Ohio. And as I said, this is about a year old already. So once we get this passed, then we'll probably do the codification again. And if anyone's got any questions.
When did you send that? Today?
I sent it about a week and a half ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
Need to find it.
I have a couple,
Yeah.
I have a question.
Oh, Ms. McGregor, please.
One, I was glad to see that we approved women may breastfeed anywhere the mother's allowed, she can feed her baby. That was a good thing. To have it actually spelled out. And also, I've never seen marijuana spelled that way. That was like, is that, I've never seen, is that usual? I've never seen that spelled. It's in all the codes.
Yeah. Not sure how
They
the
spell
spelling,
with
I've
a-
seen
they-
several different spellings. I'm
They
not sure
spell
how
with
this
an
is.
H throughout the code instead of a J.
Oh, okay.
And I was just like, is that a more
That
official?
is how they spell it in the Ohio Revised Code would be
I've
my
never
guess,
seen
because
that.
I've seen it different ways.
Have you ever
and-
seen
and
that?
yeah.
I was
Okay.
confused by that, too.
I just wondered if it was, at first I thought, oh, it's a typo, and then it goes page after page. Okay, I was just curious.
Anything else?
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Weaver.
I was happy to see updates to language reflecting developmental disability or physical impairment and stripping the code of some more outdated and inappropriate terms. So thank you for your efforts on this.
Anybody else? So what do we want to do? Move this forward? No need to come back? Consent agenda?
Well, if anybody had questions, if they haven't read it, we'd always bring it back to committee if somebody had a question, so, but I think we can move it forward other than that.
Okay. Consent is fine.
Yep. With me.
All right, sounds good.
Thanks.
All right, items from the council office.
A new liquor permit from Bob Evans on Hamilton Road. When council office receives these, we send the application to chief to see if they have any objections, and there were no objections to this application. And the process would be if council has no objections, the application moves forward and council office completes it and returns it to the Division of Liquor Control. If council has an objection, it goes on the next meeting's agenda and council would have to formally object to the permit.
I do not have any objections. Anybody?
Please have none.
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you.
Under council rules of procedure, you may remember I stuck this on here because the last time council has actually taken any action was in 2019. I thought it'd be a good time to actually look at this and evaluate and to see if there's anything that we would like to amend. Since that time, we do have a question that's actually come before us that I do believe that we need to discuss it. And it's under 6.3 of our own rules, and it's under hearing of visitors. And the gist of the matter is that under hearing of visitors, somebody wishing to speak in their normal way would have to come in, fill out a speaker slip, and then speak before us. But there's been a question about email, electronic communications, and people requesting those to be read under hearing of visitors. And I think that's just basically, so I want to just start the discussion there to see what do my colleagues actually, how do you feel? Do we keep 6.3 intact? Do we try to make an allowance for this new age where we are? The city is broadcasting, we have live stream, we're trying to make ourselves more accessible. Is there something that we should be doing under 6.3, under hearing of visitors, that leads us to greater accessibility? Mr. Weaver.
Mr. Chair, thank you. As someone who is new to the body and was certainly viewing many streaming meetings over the past, year and a half or so, I believe accessibility is very important. And frankly, a 7 o'clock meeting on a Monday evening is maybe not accessible for a large portion of our population. I would be happy to see a change that would allow someone to, for us to read in an email or other correspondence. I understand there's probably some parameters within the 3-minute limitation and how do we do that, but I think that's a discussion worth having to encourage that participation.
Okay,
Thank you, sir.
thank you. Any other input?
I would not be opposed, I think it'd be a good idea to have the comments attached to the minutes, but as far as having them read into, I mean, this could get to be an hour-long thing. I mean, if we start reading, I mean, if it's just one every once in a while, but if it got to be 4 or 5 every week, it could really extend a lot of time, the meeting time.
I understand.
And
the
I don't
concern.
know if that would be beneficial.
Right.
I mean, I agree that, I think it's a good idea, if they have comments, we could attach them in some way, but not necessarily read them into them at the meeting time.
Into the record.
Yeah.
Ms. Badova?
I agree. I think that it would be nice to have people be able to speak up even if they're not able to be here physically. When you guys were doing them virtually and they were able to call in, would that be an option that we would be able to somehow have people call in to speak and that be part of the meeting?
Yeah, under the extreme circumstances, we were, under the pandemic rules, we were allowing some type of two-way with our live streaming. And maybe, if I understand what you're saying, is to consider that here in special circumstances.
Yeah, I think, as Nancy stated, it might be a little bit lengthy reading emails, and also who would read them without it being biased is kind of a issue, but also if they're sending something long, it might end up being a lot of burden to shorten it to make it within the 3 minutes for someone to read. So that does present its obstacles.
Okay.
Mr. President, I know this is not my debate, this is really a council rules issue, but I just want to note that back when we were
transitioning from virtual meetings to returning to in-person meetings because we were incorporating the new camera technology to be able to live stream meetings. We did look at whether or not there would be an option to support calling in, and I'm going to look to our IT manager, Mr. Schultz, and ask him to step down. There were technological challenges to that, I believe, but I'm going to let him, if you're interested.
No, this would be
Speak to
good to
that.
actually have at the
Sure.
appropriate time. Thank
Yeah,
you.
we did explore that at great length to try to figure out what we could and could not do.
So currently, we can participate with a Teams meeting into the room. The problem with that is that you guys talking back to that participant actually doesn't get back through the Teams meeting itself. We can pipe that person into the room, but they wouldn't be able to hear the proceedings through Teams with the way in which the technology is currently implemented in the room. We could potentially make some small adjustments to the technology to accommodate that outside participation for the two-way participation. But the way in which the room is currently set up, it is not possible.
Okay. So it sounds like there's a barrier, but if council was really interested, we can try to push it a little bit.
Correct.
Understood. Yes, Mr. Snester.
Thank you, Mr. President. I guess perhaps I'm a bit old-fashioned, but having done this for over 8 years, I know I receive, in the course of a given week, multiple resident, whether it's an email or phone call or something like that, or just being kind of out and about. So obviously, we've all been in these chambers when folks have come to the lectern. So I guess just based on evidence, I don't know that it's that big of an impediment to require the in-person. I'm not opposed to, I suppose, like Nancy suggested, if somebody made a proactive request of, hey, on this particular topic, under hearing of visitors, I'd like, this email or this letter attached to the minutes or something, I wouldn't necessarily be opposed to that. But I guess the idea of reading letters into the minutes, again, I think it could perhaps, like Nancy suggested, could become a bit burdensome. So I don't know. Like I said, maybe that's just being a bit old-fashioned, but what we have now seems to work for the most part, and so I'm just not 100% sure that it needs to be significantly changed.
Thank you. For the record, just so that everybody knows, I actually, it probably surprised you, but I'm really very much opposed. I'm open to an idea of maybe copying to the minutes, but I really do hold value our local government, and the key word is participatory. And we want our citizens to engage with us, and in order to really rightly and appropriately engage, I do believe that we built the city hall and we have a chamber for people to come. If we go off, in my opinion, but if we go off into a world of social media, I really am diametrically opposed to that. And I do believe it's already stated for the record that if we start adding the ability to read every letter, then we're probably going to slowly get inundated with. And I think we need to err on the side of we can copy the minutes, but then if you really do feel strongly that your local government needs to hear you and it needs to be reflected in the minutes, then you should so strongly actually come physically down before us and actually talk to us. I don't think there's an electronic way for that, but that's my opinion. So I guess what I understand is that maybe we can look at some minor change to the rule about copying to our minutes. Is that what I understand? If we do receive something, then we can, if somebody does request it electronically, we'll copy it to the minutes.
I say I can do that, or I can go as it is, whatever, either way.
Okay. One of my concerns too is that I saw in some, or maybe it was in other discussions, we do have a section called council comment, and I'm worried and I caution my colleagues from using council comment to actually read something from a constituent. Again, for the same reasons that I've already iterated, I think council comment is actually maybe even better defined in here, but that is a view of a council, an elected, and not to be used as a transformative or a proxy for somebody who doesn't wish to come down here. Mr. Smetser.
Mr. President, I was just going to ask, maybe it might make sense to have our council office look into perhaps what other cities are doing, or if the Clerks Association has any thoughts or best practices on this, again, just this concept of either written or electronic correspondence making its way into the
So we
minutes.
did ask Crystal.
Okay.
We did look into this, and even like peak COVID back in I don't even know when at this point, sometime a year ago or more. We looked at including what's called, I forget what it's called, but it's a tool that goes on where you view our agendas and minutes currently. You could send in your comments that way. We looked at that tool. What we talked about at the time was it was very similar to social media. And we felt at the time, at least from the clerk's office, that it wasn't the proper place to submit comments like that. The way you participate, like you said, in a council meeting is different from how you participate on Facebook or Twitter. So we decided against using that tool. We looked at other options, and we looked at other cities, and really it's all over the place. With COVID, the laws did change to allow for virtual meetings and a hybrid setting even, not just fully virtual. But that's something that has to be changed through your charter. It's not something that can be changed through your council rules. So that came about after our Charter Review Commission had met, so it wasn't even something that we could bring to our Charter Review Commission. So when it does come around again in 5 years, it's something that you all can look at. But the cities that are utilizing that hybrid method, they did change their charter. They have changed their code sections as well. So we don't have that ability, and at the end of the day, you have to decide what's best for Gahanna. You know, look at your residents and how they participate in meetings, and you know, go with your gut there.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much. Okay, so I don't know if we need to really go any deeper than that, but it sounds like that if there is a one-off case that somebody does submit to us, we'll copy it readily to the minutes, but it will not be read. Right? Okay. I don't have anything else for our council rules, but I am interested in actually moving this forward to an agenda and for an adoption, not by next Monday, but I asked my colleagues to actually be ready for something maybe later in February that we actually physically adopt them.
2 Mondays.
Resolution recognizing and honoring Black History Month. I know that February is Black History Month. I don't know much more. I didn't prepare this resolution.
Councilwoman Bowers drafted this with Deputy Clerk Pam. So if it was put on the agenda in case anybody wants to add or amend things
Okay.
before it goes on Monday's meeting.
I'm all for supporting it.
Can
I don't see where.
I don't have, I mean, this is a great thing to do this resolution, but I want to see the wording before I pass it.
It's on the legislature.
I mean, I feel like, I don't have it.
It's on
I mean, even the last one we had, what was last month? We had one last week or something, and
Oh, if you go to the text in the Legistar, you can actually see the wording.
legislative, yeah. It looks like it's.
it doesn't come up on mine.
Okay,
Legislation text.
we can try to get that addressed.
Oh, okay.
But in the future, what we'll do is we'll try to make
Well-
sure that it's in multiple ways.
Maybe, okay, she showed me where.
Okay.
But if I'm looking, if I can't see it, then nobody else can see it
No,
either. And
I
so-
understand that. That's a good point. We should probably next time have an attachment or have something.
Put it as an attachment,
Any further questions about that? The next one is an ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into agreement with Franklin County Board of Elections for use of city property as a polling location for the year 2022. I've asked Crystal, because I needed a little bit of history and understanding a little bit, why does this show up on a council office? So, Crystal, can you enlighten us?
Certainly, but I do have a question about that previous item. Do you want that on the regular agenda? Nancy, would that give you an opportunity to look through it?
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
I'll try. I can't get into it from legislators for some reason, so I'll have to figure out. Yeah, I'd just like to see it before.
Absolutely,
I vote
yeah.
on it.
And I think that's why we put it on the agenda, so everybody has opinions, and you might have, personal preference. Anyone might have a personal preference on what to add or to remove item. So Pam will put it on the regular agenda for Monday. And in the meantime, if you do have any amendments, you can always reach out to our office, and we can change that before Monday. Okay, so on the item, Mr. Renner, that you brought up, so every year we bring this contract forward. It's always brought forward by our office, and I can't tell you exactly when this became a responsibility of council office, but it's been our responsibility since I've worked there. So what we do is we get this agreement every year from the Franklin County Board of Elections, and our office coordinates with them to set up locations here for voting. So this year we have a May 3rd primary and a November 8th general election. So you have plenty of time. This is not something that has to move forward today, but there is a change in this agreement from last year to this year. So we've been working with the poll workers to set up early, instead of coming at 5:30 in the morning and trying to rush through and get all the machines up and running and get through any technical issues they have. They've been coming to set up at the Senior Center and City Hall on Monday evenings. That's been very successful for them. And that gives them time to reach out to the county for support if they need it. So they've written that into their agreement for this year. And if it is the case that you want to move forward with the agreement, again, we still have time if you have questions, if you want to hold this in committee. I did send this to the city attorney. I haven't had any comments back yet. So if you do have comments you'd like to add, or if you want to have more time to look at it, so be it. But we just try to be a good partner with them, because they are essentially volunteers. I know they do get paid a stipend, but they're there for very long hours, and they work really hard. So the agreement does cover things like the number of handicap parking spaces, and this year, in addition to the change in setup day, they added language in here for election day campaigning. They haven't changed anything. It still meets the Ohio Revised Code, but they made a point to add that into their agreement. That is all I have on that, unless you have any questions.
No, but thank you for explaining.
Yeah, certainly.
Okay. Anybody have any questions?
So I did take a quick look at the agreement, and the agreement noted setup to happen the evening before between the hours of 6 to 9, which would be happening during the council meeting that would be scheduled for that evening. So does council see there to be any conflict with that? I mean, I saw the language in the agreement also said they would work with us if there was a conflict, but just to keep that in mind.
They set up in the committee room. Like we were meeting in person the last time, at the last election, and they didn't they're very quiet, they're very respectful, and they also come into a separate entrance. So they haven't, in my experience, posed any inconvenience to the public meetings. It's actually very convenient for us, because we're already here in the building, so we can let them in, let them out without any concern.
Don't have to come in at 4 o'clock in the morning. I assume they would
Yeah.
prefer that as well.
And we did work with them. They did set this time, like you just mentioned, but they said they're willing to work with us. So if there's an event going on over at the Senior Center that's going to go until 8 o'clock, one of us will just let them in afterwards. That still gave them more time to do what they needed to do in November.
Great.
Can you come back?
Will I come back?
Yeah.
For the,
I'm still trying.
that's a trick
I'm
question.
trying.
I know what you're trying to do.
Okay, so that, just for clarity and the close the loop, that ordinance will be on our agenda on a consent. No need to come back, right? Okay. Have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Yes, Mr.
Marijuana with a J owes its origins to Mexican Spanish, which explains why the J is pronounced the Spanish way. When the U.S. federal government passed the Marijuana with an H Tax Act of 1937, it used the alternative spelling that simplified pronunciation for people unfamiliar with the Spanish language, and has since been used in ordinances and statutes throughout since the federal government first started using that spelling. Just so you know.
Speaking of that, are we moving forward on the marijuana issue?
Yes, we will. We'll be scheduling a road tour, probably sometime in, I want to say late February. Our goal is to have something on the agenda brought back to council by the end of Q1 of this year, so the end of March.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, everybody.